Captain Eric Mason stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Horizon, watching the swirling blue-green atmosphere of Zarth Prime grow larger on the main view screen. After 3 years of long-distance communication, humans were finally meeting, the Zarthians face-to-face. "How's our approach looking, Lieutenant Rodriguez?" Eric asked, straightening his dark blue uniform. "Perfect trajectory, Captain. The Zarthian orbital control is guiding us to docking bay 7 of their main station," replied the navigation officer, his fingers moving across the glowing control panel. Eric nodded, trying to hide his nervousness. This wasn't just any diplomatic mission. The Zarthians were the first advanced alien civilization humanity had encountered, and everything needed to go perfectly. The future relationship between two species depended on it. His communications officer, Lieutenant Susan Porter, looked up from her station. "Captain, incoming transmission from Zarthian High Command." On screen, Eric said, taking a deep breath. "The view screen flickered, revealing a tall, thin being with pale blue, almost translucent skin. The Zarthian had 4 arms and 2 legs, with large, pupilless eyes that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. High Commander Zelthar wore what looked like a ceremonial robe covered in swirling patterns. "Captain Mason of Earth Vessel Horizon." The alien's voice came through the translator, sounding slightly metallic but understandable. "We welcome you to the Zarthian Confederacy. Your arrival marks a historic day for both our peoples." Eric smiled. "Thank you, High Commander. We're honored to be here and look forward to establishing friendly relations between our worlds." After finalizing docking procedures, Eric gathered his diplomatic team in the conference room. Lieutenant Porter, Dr. Nathan Rodriguez, the ship's xenobiologist, and Commander Alex Hayes, head of security, sat around the table looking at the final briefing materials. "Remember," Eric said, "we know very little about their social customs despite all our communications. Their biology is dramatically different from ours, so expect the unexpected." Dr. Rodriguez nodded eagerly. "Their reproductive cycle alone is fascinating. They develop in communal pools for 20 years before emerging as fully formed adults. No childhood as we understand it. Which brings me to an important point," Eric continued. "The school field trip from the Earth colony on Proxima B will be arriving tomorrow. 30 children between ages 8 and 12, here to learn about alien contact. The Zarthians have expressed particular interest in seeing them." Commander Hayes frowned. "Is that wise, Captain? We barely know these aliens." "The Educational Committee approved it months ago," Eric replied. "And the Zarthians seem genuinely curious about human development. Remember, they've only seen adult humans in our transmissions. This could be a valuable cultural exchange." The meeting was interrupted by the ship's computer announcing their successful docking with the Zarthian station. It was time. The first meeting went better than Eric had hoped. The Zarthian Welcoming Committee, led by High Commander Zelthar, seemed genuinely excited to meet humans. They toured the station, exchanged gifts, and began preliminary discussions about trade and cultural exchange. Eric noticed that the Zarthians kept asking questions about human reproduction and development. Dr. Rodriguez handled most of these queries, explaining human biology in scientific terms. "Fascinating," said Science Director Zalvex, a female Zarthian with slightly greener skin than her colleagues. "And you say these children are fully conscious? They can think and communicate before physical maturity?" "Of course," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "Human children develop consciousness very early. They're smaller and still learning, but they're definitely people with their own thoughts and personalities." The Zarthians exchanged looks that Eric couldn't interpret. He made a mental note to discuss this with his team later. The next day, the school shuttle arrived. Ms. Mary Garcia, a gray-haired teacher with a kind smile, led her excited students onto the horizon. The children, dressed in matching blue and white uniforms, stared wide-eyed at their surroundings. "Remember your manners," Ms. Garcia reminded them. "You're representing all of humanity today." Captain Eric greeted them warmly. "Welcome aboard, everyone. I know you've been studying the Zarthians in school. Today you'll get to meet them in person." Billy Collins, a small boy with curly brown hair, raised his hand. "Captain, do the aliens really have 4 arms? Can they move them all at once?" Eric smiled. "Yes to both questions, Billy, and they're very excited to meet all of you." When the Zarthian delegation arrived to meet the children, Eric noticed their strange reaction. The aliens seemed almost shocked, exchanging rapid communications in their native language that the translators couldn't keep up with. High Commander Zelthar approached Eric. "These small ones, they are the children you spoke of?" "Yes," Eric replied. "Ages 8 to 12 Earth years. They're here to learn about interspecies diplomacy. And they are permitted to move freely, to speak, to make decisions?" The Zarthian's voice held a tone Eric hadn't heard before. "Of course," Eric said, growing concerned. "They're supervised by their teacher, but they're here to learn through experience." Ms. Garcia had organized the children into small groups, each exploring different aspects of the diplomatic meeting room. Some were looking at Zarthian artifacts. Others were asking questions about the station's technology. 3 children, Billy, Collins, Samantha Wright, and Kevin Patel, were particularly interested in the Zarthian writing system displayed on a wall panel. Science Director Zalvex approached them, all 4 of her arms moving in different patterns. "You can understand these symbols?" she asked, her large eyes blinking rapidly. "Not really," Samantha replied. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she pushed her glasses up her nose. "But they look like they might be mathematical patterns, are they?" The Zarthian seemed startled by the question. "Yes, they are equations for space-time navigation. You recognize the pattern structure? Math is the same everywhere, isn't it?" Samantha shrugged. As the cultural exchange continued, Eric noticed the Zarthians growing increasingly agitated. They kept forming small groups, talking rapidly among themselves, then breaking apart to observe the children more closely. Near the end of the scheduled visit, Eric couldn't find Billy, Samantha, or Kevin. He approached Ms. Garcia, trying not to show his concern. "Are all the students accounted for?" he asked quietly. Ms. Garcia did a quick count, then her face paled. "We're missing 3. Billy, Samantha, and Kevin were looking at the star maps just a moment ago." Eric immediately alerted Commander Hayes, who organized search parties throughout the diplomatic section. After 30 minutes with no sign of the children, Eric confronted High Commander Zelthar. 3 of our children are missing. We need your help finding them." The Zarthian's skin changed color slightly, taking on a purplish hue. "Captain Mason, there is no cause for alarm. The underdeveloped specimens appeared to be wandering without purpose or supervision. According to our protocols, they have been taken for proper evaluation and care." Eric felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean? Taken? Those are children, not specimens. Where are they?" "They are being transported to our main scientific facility on our moon base," the Zarthian replied, seemingly confused by Eric's reaction. "Surely you don't allow such underdeveloped life forms to make decisions or move about freely without restraint? It's most unsafe." Eric's hand moved to his communicator. "Commander Hayes, seal all doors to the horizon. No one leaves. We have a situation." He turned back to the Zarthian leader, his voice deadly serious. "High Commander, you've taken our children without permission. In human society, this is one of the most serious offenses possible. I demand their immediate return." The Zarthian's confusion seemed genuine. "Offense? We are providing appropriate care for immature specimens. You're allowing them to wander freely, is what our people would consider an offense." As alarms began to sound throughout the ship, Eric realized that what had started as a historic diplomatic mission had just turned into a nightmare. The fate of 3 children, and possibly peace, between their species now hung in the balance. Lieutenant Susan Porter had never seen Captain Eric Mason so angry. His face was red as he paced the conference room where the remaining children had been safely returned to the horizon. "They took our children, and don't even understand why we're upset," Eric said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Lieutenant Porter, you're our diplomatic expert. How do we handle this?" Susan ran her hand through her short blonde hair. "This is clearly a profound cultural misunderstanding, Captain. From what we've learned, Zarthian young develop without consciousness until their final maturation. They literally have no concept of childhood as we understand it." The parents of the missing children sat around the table, faces pale with worry. John Wright, Samantha's father, spoke up. I don't care about their cultural differences. My daughter has been kidnapped. We're doing everything possible to get them back safely, Eric assured him. Commander Hayes, what's our status? Commander Alex Hayes stood by the tactical display. His dark skin contrasted with the blue glow of the screen showing the Zarthian moon base. The transport ship carrying the children docked at their moon facility 20 minutes ago. We've sent formal requests for their return through 6 different channels. So far, all we've received are messages about proper containment protocols. For immature specimens. Dr. Nathan Rodriguez entered the room carrying his datapad. Captain, I've been analyzing what we know about Zarthian biology. Their misunderstanding goes deeper than we thought. Their young develop in those pools for 20 years with no brain activity we would recognize as consciousness. To them, the concept of a thinking, feeling child is like us imagining a thinking, feeling embryo. So they think they're rescuing fetuses that we're negligently allowing to wander around? Eric asked, incredulous. Essentially, yes, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. In their culture, what they're doing is the ethical action. Eric turned to Susan. Lieutenant Porter, I need you to establish emergency communications with their highest authority. Explain our differences in development and make them understand the severity of this situation. Susan nodded and left quickly for the communications center. Eric looked at the worried parents. I promise you we will get your children back safely. On the Zarthian moon base, Billy Collins pressed his ear against the strange, translucent door of their containment room. The space was large and oddly comfortable, with soft surfaces and glowing panels on the walls. Can you hear anything? Samantha Wright asked, adjusting her glasses nervously. Billy shook his head. Not really. Just weird humming sounds. Kevin Patel, the youngest of the 3, sat cross-legged on the floor. Do you think they're going to dissect us? In all the movies, aliens always want to dissect humans. Don't be stupid, Samantha said, though her voice trembled slightly. They seem advanced. They probably just want to study us without cutting us open. We need to figure out how to communicate with them, Billy said, stepping away from the door. They don't seem to understand that taking us was wrong. The door suddenly slid open and 2 Zarthians entered. One was Science Director Zalvex, who they recognized from the ship. The other was a Zarthian they hadn't seen before, wearing what looked like a medical uniform. Specimens appear alert and communicative, the medical officer said, all 4 arms, moving in different patterns as he operated a floating device that scanned the children, most unusual for preforms, possibly a defensive adaptation. We're not specimens, Samantha said firmly, stepping forward. We're people, and you can't just take us from our parents. The Zarthians froze, looking at each other in what appeared to be shock. The preform speaks with apparent sentience, Zalvex said, blinking rapidly. This contradicts all developmental biology we understand. That's what we've been trying to tell you, Billy joined in. Human kids are people too, just smaller. We're not like your whatever you have that grows up. Back on the horizon, Susan Porter had finally established communication with the Zarthian High Council. On the main view screen, 5 senior Zarthians looked down at her from what appeared to be a formal chamber. Esteemed counselors, Susan began, I must inform you that the removal of our children has created a serious diplomatic crisis. In human culture, children are fully conscious beings with rights. Taking them without permission is considered kidnapping, a severe crime. The central figure, who introduced himself as Supreme Leader Zazur, responded with visible confusion. Lieutenant Porter, we find your claims disturbing and illogical. No species we have encountered allows preforms to develop consciousness before physical maturation. It is biologically inefficient and potentially dangerous. Susan kept her voice, calm but firm. Nevertheless, human children are conscious, thinking beings from birth. Their removal has caused extreme distress to their families and risks our peaceful relations. The communication was interrupted by a message from Commander Hayes. Lieutenant, we've detected 3 Earth ships entering the system at high speed. It's Admiral Reeves with the Defender, Guardian, and Sentinel. Susan felt her stomach sink. Admiral Linda Reeves was known for her protective stance toward human colonies and her distrust of alien contact. Having her arrive with 3 heavily armed vessels could escalate the situation dangerously. Supreme Leader, Susan said quickly, more human ships are arriving. They're concerned about our missing children. I urge you to return them immediately to prevent any misunderstanding. We will consider your request, the Zarthian leader replied before ending the transmission. Admiral Linda Reeves was a tall woman with steel-gray hair cut in a severe military style. She stood in the Horizon's conference room, her uniform impeccable, her expression hard. Captain Mason, you mean to tell me that aliens have abducted 3 human children and taken them to their research facility? She asked, her voice cutting. Yes, Admiral, but it's a cultural misunderstanding. They genuinely believe they're acting ethically, Eric explained. Lieutenant Porter is making progress in negotiations. Cultural misunderstanding or not, those children will be returned, the Admiral stated flatly. I've positioned our ships around their moon base. They have 6 hours to return the children unharmed, or we take more direct action. Eric felt the situation spiraling out of control. Admiral, with all due respect, threatening military action could make things worse. The Zarthians aren't hostile. They're confused. I don't share your optimism, Captain, Admiral Reeves replied. Prepare a rescue team. If diplomacy fails, we go in and get our people. In the Zarthian facility, the children had discovered something interesting. The glowing panels on the walls responded to touch, and Samantha, who loved computers, had figured out they were some kind of information terminals. Look at this, she said, manipulating the strange symbols. I think this is their equivalent of the internet. Can you make it show videos or something? Kevin asked, peering over her shoulder. Maybe, Samantha replied, her fingers moving across the panel. If I can figure out their logic system. Suddenly the panel lit up brightly, displaying what appeared to be a Zarthian educational program about human contact. You did it, Billy exclaimed. They're studying us, but we can study them too, Samantha said with a small smile. Maybe if we learn more about them, we can find a way to explain who we are. Outside the facility, the human ships maintained their positions, weapons systems on standby. Inside the Horizon, Lieutenant Porter worked desperately to prevent a conflict that could destroy any hope of peaceful relations between humans and Zarthians. And in the Zarthian High Council chamber, Supreme Leader Zazur faced a difficult decision. Return the young humans and admit a grave cultural error, or stand firm on what Zarthian biology and ethics considered proper care of developing life forms. The fate of 3 children now rested on whether 2 vastly different species could overcome their biological and cultural differences to find understanding. Dr. Nathan Rodriguez couldn't sleep. While military tension built between the human ships and Zarthian defenses, he kept thinking there must be a solution. He sat in his lab aboard the Horizon, reviewing everything they knew about Zarthian biology and culture. There has to be a way to make them understand, he muttered to himself, rubbing his tired eyes. He pulled up the images of Zarthian young developing in their communal pools, strange tadpole-like creatures that slowly grew limbs and features over 20 years. According to their data, these young had no brain activity similar to consciousness until their final stage of development. Suddenly, Nathan sat up straight. That's it! He rushed to Captain Eric Mason's quarters and buzzed the door urgently. Eric opened the door, still in his uniform despite the late hour. Dr. Rodriguez, what is it? Captain, I know how to solve this, Nathan said, holding up his datapad. We need to show the Zarthians proof of human childhood consciousness, not just tell them about it. Eric looked skeptical. We've been trying to explain— No, not explain, demonstrate, Nathan interrupted. Videos of children solving problems, creating art, writing stories. Evidence they can't deny. And we need to get the Zarthians to actually talk with our children directly, with proper translation. Eric nodded slowly. It might work. Let's talk to Lieutenant Porter. In the Zarthian research facility, the 3 children had made an important discovery. After figuring out more of the touch panel controls, Samantha had found a way to access the facility's lighting system. If we change the light patterns, she explained to Billy and Kevin, maybe we can send a message to anyone looking for us. Like a signal? Kevin asked, his eyes widening. Exactly, Samantha replied. My dad taught me Morse code for fun. We can make the lights blink to spell words. Billy grinned. The aliens won't understand, but our people might see it if they're watching the facility. The three worked together, figuring out how to program the lights in their section to flash in patterns. SOS was the first message they sent, followed by, "Kids okay." Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, Science Director Zalvex was reviewing the data from observing the human children. What she had seen confused her deeply. These small humans showed clear signs of complex thinking, emotional awareness, and even creative problem-solving. By Zarthian standards, it was impossible. A junior scientist entered her office. "Director, the human preforms have somehow accessed the environmental controls. They are causing the illumination to pulse in patterns." Zalvex blinked in surprise. "Patterns? What kind of patterns?" "We believe it may be a communication attempt," the scientist replied. "And there's more. They've also modified the educational terminal in their chamber to display Earth visual entertainment programs." Zalvex rose from her seat, all four arms moving in patterns of shock. "That would require understanding our operating system logic. How is this possible for undeveloped specimens?" On board the Horizon, Lieutenant Susan Porter had called an emergency meeting with Captain Eric, Dr. Rodriguez, and one other crucial person, Mary Garcia, the children's teacher. Ms. Garcia, Susan, explained, "We need your help convincing the Zarthians that human children are conscious, thinking beings. You've worked with children for 30 years. Your expertise could be vital." The older woman nodded firmly. "I'll do anything to help get those kids back safely." Dr. Rodriguez outlined his plan. "We need to prepare a presentation with clear, undeniable evidence of childhood consciousness and capabilities. Videos, artwork, test results, anything that shows children thinking and creating. I have plenty of examples from my teaching career," Mary said. "Children's artwork, their stories, videos of them solving problems and discussing complex ideas." Captain Eric nodded. "Good. I'll arrange an emergency meeting with their High Council. Admiral Reeves has given us 12 more hours before she takes action." Back at the Zarthian facility, Billy, Samantha, and Kevin had decided to try something bold. When the Zarthian scientists brought in food trays, the children pretended to be asleep. As soon as the scientists left, Billy wedged the transparent door open with a piece of the food tray while Samantha and Kevin slipped out. "Remember," Samantha whispered, "we just want to look around. Maybe find a communication device to contact the Horizon." The two children crept down the strange corridor. With its glowing walls and floor, they found themselves in what appeared to be a laboratory with multiple screens displaying data. "Look," Kevin pointed. "Those look like pictures of us. They're studying us." Samantha approached one of the terminals and began touching it like she had learned from the one in their room. "Let's see if we can understand what they're saying about us." To their surprise, they managed to activate a translation program that converted some of the Zarthian text to English, likely part of the cultural exchange database. What they read shocked them. "They think we're not supposed to be conscious." "Yet," Samantha said, eyes wide. "According to this, their young don't develop awareness until they're fully grown. They think our parents are negligent for letting us think for ourselves." "That's crazy," Kevin replied. "We need to tell them they're wrong." Before they could do more, they heard sounds of Zarthians approaching. They quickly hid under a table with a long, draping cover. Science Director Zalvex entered with several other scientists, all gesticulating with their multiple arms. "The brain scans confirm it," one scientist was saying. "These human preforms show neural activity patterns consistent with full consciousness. It contradicts everything we know about efficient biological development." "We may have made a serious error," Zalvex replied, her skin changing color slightly. "If these young are indeed conscious beings with self-awareness, then removing them from their group may be interpreted as a hostile action by the humans." Under the table, Samantha and Kevin exchanged excited looks. The aliens were starting to understand. On the Horizon, the diplomatic team had prepared their presentation and secured a meeting with the Zarthian High Council. Lieutenant Porter, Captain Eric, Dr. Rodriguez, and Ms. Garcia gathered in the communication center. The large screen activated, showing the 5 members of the High Council. Supreme Leader Zazer spoke first. Captain Mason, we have received concerning reports from our research facility. It appears the human young may possess attributes we did not anticipate. That's what we've been trying to tell you, Eric replied firmly. Human children are fully conscious, thinking beings from a very young age. Taking them without permission is one of the most serious offenses in our culture. We have prepared a presentation to help you understand, Susan added. Ms. Garcia is an expert in human childhood development and education. Mary stepped forward, her kind face determined. Esteemed Council, I have taught human children for over 30 years. Please allow me to show you evidence of their consciousness, creativity, and emotional awareness. As Mary began showing videos of children in her classroom solving problems, creating art, and discussing complex ethical questions, the Zarthian Council members displayed visible reactions of surprise. This contradicts all evolutionary efficiency models we understand, one council member said. Nevertheless, it is the truth, Dr. Rodriguez replied. Human children may be physically immature, but their minds are active and developing through experience and exploration. While the presentation continued, Commander Hayes received an urgent message from one of the human ships monitoring the Zarthian facility. Captain, he interrupted, we're detecting unusual light patterns from the research facility. It appears to be Morse code. He paused, then smiled. The message reads, "Kids okay and we hacked alien computer." Eric couldn't help but smile. I think the children are making our case for us better than we ever could. Captain Eric Mason stood at the shuttle bay airlock, waiting for the Zarthian transport to dock. After days of tension, Supreme Leader Zazer had agreed to a face-to-face meeting aboard the Horizon. More importantly, the Zarthians had finally agreed to bring the children with them. Admiral Linda Reeves stood beside Eric, her face stern. I still don't trust them, Captain. My ships remain on alert. I understand, Admiral, Eric replied. But I believe they genuinely didn't understand the situation. Today we have a chance to resolve this peacefully. The airlock hissed open, revealing Supreme Leader Zazer, flanked by Science Director Zalvex and 2 other Zarthian officials. Behind them, to Eric's immense relief, were Billy, Samantha, and Kevin, looking tired but unharmed. The parents, waiting anxiously nearby, rushed forward. John Wright dropped to his knees, embracing his daughter Samantha tightly. The other parents did the same with their children, tears flowing freely. Supreme Leader Zazer observed this emotional reunion with rapid blinking of his large eyes. This attachment behavior is most remarkable, he said quietly to Zalvex. So different from our own species. Eric stepped forward. Supreme Leader, thank you for bringing the children. We have prepared a meeting room for our discussion. The Zarthian leader nodded. Yes. We have much to discuss. These events have revealed significant misunderstandings between our peoples. In the conference room, humans and Zarthians sat on opposite sides of a large table. The children had been taken to the medical bay for checkups, although they had insisted they were fine and had even described their stay as kind of cool once the aliens realized we could think. Admiral Reeves spoke first, her voice sharp. Let's be clear about what happened here. You took human children without permission and refused to return them immediately when asked. In human terms, that's kidnapping. Science Director Zalvex's skin flushed a deeper blue. We deeply regret the misunderstanding. You must understand, in our biology and culture, this situation was impossible to anticipate. Dr. Rodriguez activated a display showing side-by-side images of human and Zarthian development. Admiral, if I may explain, Zarthian young develop without consciousness for 20 years. Their equivalent of children are essentially biological automatons growing in nutrient pools. John Wright, who had insisted on joining the meeting, stood up suddenly. His face was red with emotion as he pointed at the Zarthian leader. You detained human children? Are you insane? He shouted. I don't care about your biology. My daughter was terrified. In our culture, taking children from their families is among the gravest offenses possible. He took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. Our children may be small, but they are people, thinking, feeling people with rights and protections under our laws. The room fell silent. Supreme Leader Zazur's skin had paled to an almost white color, a sign of strong emotion in Zarthians. "Mr. Wright," the alien leader said finally, "your words are correct. We have committed a grave cultural transgression against your people." He turned to face everyone at the table. "In our ignorance, we applied our own biological reality to yours with disastrous results." Lieutenant Susan Porter, ever the diplomat, sensed an opportunity. "Supreme Leader, this incident, while unfortunate, has taught both our species something valuable about each other. Perhaps we can use this as a foundation for better understanding." Captain Eric nodded. "Exactly. Cultural differences can be bridged with knowledge and goodwill." The tense discussion continued for nearly 2 hours. The Zarthians explained their reproductive cycle in detail, how their species laid thousands of eggs that developed in communal pools, gradually growing over 2 decades without any brain activity that could be called consciousness. Only in the final stage did they rapidly develop awareness and emerge as fully formed adults. To us, Zalvex explained, the concept of small conscious beings that need nurturing and guidance through a childhood phase is utterly foreign. When we saw your children moving independently and making choices, we assumed they must be some kind of automated biological constructs. And we never considered that your young might develop differently than ours," Eric admitted. "We have much to learn from each other." As the meeting progressed, an urgent message came from the medical bay. "Captain," the ship's doctor reported, "the children are missing again." Eric sighed. "Not again. Search the ship. They can't have gone far." 20 minutes later, Security Officer Pat Lee found the 3 children in the Zarthian shuttle bay, surrounded by 5 junior Zarthian scientists. To everyone's surprise, the children weren't trying to escape. They were teaching the Zarthians how to play hopscotch, using markings they had drawn on the deck. When Eric and Supreme Leader Zazur arrived at the scene, they found Kevin jumping through the hopscotch pattern while the Zarthians watched with fascination. Billy was explaining the rules while Samantha had somehow convinced one of the aliens to try jumping on their 6 limbs. "See?" Billy was saying. "It's fun because you have to balance. You can play too if you want," he added, noticing the captain and the Supreme Leader. Zazur turned to Eric, all 4 arms spread in a gesture of amazement. "These young ones, after what we did, they still approach our people with openness and curiosity, no fear, no anger?" Eric smiled, watching the impromptu cultural exchange. "That's the thing about human children. They're resilient, forgiving, and naturally curious. They often see past differences that adults get hung up on." "A most remarkable evolutionary adaptation," the Zarthian leader observed. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your approach to development after all." Back in the conference room, with the children safely returned to their parents, the negotiations took a positive turn. Admiral Reeves, seeing the genuine remorse and desire for understanding from the Zarthians, softened her stance. "What happened can't be undone," she said. "But going forward, we need clear protocols for cultural exchange that respect both our species' differences." Supreme Leader Zazur agreed. "We propose a formal apology to the families affected, and we wish to establish a cultural understanding committee with human representatives to prevent such misunderstandings in the future." As the details were being worked out, Science Director Zalvex approached Captain Eric privately. "There is something else you should know," she said quietly. "During their time in our facility, your children demonstrated remarkable problem-solving abilities. They accessed our systems, reprogrammed our environmental controls, and even established communication with each other through our computer network. They're resourceful," Eric said with a hint of pride. "They did in 3 days what would take our scientists weeks to accomplish with an unfamiliar system," Zalvex continued. "Several of my research team have requested permission to study human childhood development methods. They believe we may have much to learn from your species." Eric smiled. "I think that could be arranged, under proper supervision, of course." As humans and Zarthians cautiously moved toward resolution, the 3 children who had inadvertently sparked this diplomatic crisis sat together in the ship's recreation room, already turning their adventure into elaborate stories to tell their friends back home. Do you think they'll let us visit the aliens again? Kevin asked hopefully. Maybe, Samantha replied. But next time, with permission. Billy nodded wisely. And maybe next time, we can teach them something even better than hopscotch. 3 months had passed since the incident with the Zarthians. The Horizon was now docked at Earth's main space station, undergoing repairs and upgrades before its next mission. Captain Eric Mason stood at the large observation window watching shuttles move between the station and planet below. Lieutenant Susan Porter joined him holding 2 cups of coffee. "Big day today," she said, handing him one of the cups. Eric nodded. "The first official Zarthian delegation to Earth. Who would have thought our first contact would start with a kidnapping and end with a cultural exchange program? Sometimes, understanding comes from the most unexpected places," Susan replied. The children certainly helped bridge the gap. The incident had initially caused anger throughout human colonies. Many people had called for cutting off all contact with the Zarthians. But over time, as the full story spread and people understood the profound biological and cultural differences that had led to the misunderstanding, attitudes began to change. Supreme Leader Zazer had issued a formal apology to all humanity, explaining in detail why the misunderstanding had occurred, and expressing deep regret for the distress caused. More importantly, the Zarthians had proposed a comprehensive cultural exchange program, with special focus on understanding human childhood development, a concept that continued to fascinate their scientists. The shuttle bay doors opened, and Eric and Susan went to greet the arriving Zarthian delegation. To their surprise, Science Director Zalvex was accompanied not only by other Zarthian officials but also by Billy, Samantha, and Kevin, the 3 children who had been at the center of the incident. "Captain Mason," Billy called, waving excitedly. "We got to ride on the Zarthian ship. It was awesome." Eric smiled. "I see our cultural ambassadors have been hard at work." Zalvex's skin rippled with what Eric had learned to recognize as amusement. "These young humans have been most helpful in explaining childhood concepts to our team. They are remarkably patient teachers." After the initial crisis, the children had become minor celebrities. Rather than being traumatized by their experience, they had embraced their role as first contact kids and eagerly participated in the cultural exchange program, with proper supervision and parental approval this time. Samantha adjusted her glasses. "We've been teaching them about human schools and how we learn. They're coming to visit our school today. And my soccer game tomorrow," Kevin added proudly. The Human Zarthian Cultural Understanding Committee, established after the incident, had worked diligently to prevent similar misunderstandings. Captain Eric and Lieutenant Porter had both received commendations for their handling of the crisis, while Admiral Reeves had surprised everyone by becoming one of the strongest advocates for continued relations with the Zarthians. "They made a mistake based on their biology," she had explained to Earth's governing council. "Once they understood, they took immediate steps to make amends. That shows character." Now, as Eric escorted the delegation toward the transport that would take them to Earth, he reflected on how close they had come to disaster. If the children hadn't shown such resilience and intelligence, if the Zarthians hadn't been willing to reconsider their assumptions, if Admiral Reeves had acted on her initial impulse for military action, any of these could have led to tragedy instead of understanding. The next day, Zarthian representatives visited an elementary school in Washington, D.C. News cameras captured the remarkable sight of the 6-limbed alien sitting on tiny chairs, observing a class of first graders with expressions of wonder. "They learned through play?" one Zarthian scientist asked the teacher. "Yes, play is one of the most important ways children learn," she explained. "Through games and activities, they develop problem-solving skills, creativity, and social understanding." The Zarthians watched as children built towers with blocks, painted pictures, and worked together on simple math problems. To beings whose young developed without consciousness for 20 years, the sight of small humans actively learning and creating was revolutionary. Later that week, Supreme Leader Zazer addressed the United Earth Council. His speech was broadcast throughout human territories. "Our misunderstanding regarding your young has led us to question many of our assumptions about development and consciousness," he said. "While our biological paths differ greatly, We see now that there is much wisdom in your approach to nurturing, developing minds through experience and guided exploration. He then announced that the Zarthian Confederacy would be establishing a permanent embassy on Earth and invited human representatives to do the same on Zarth Prime. From an unfortunate beginning, may we build a lasting friendship between our peoples, he concluded. John Wright, Samantha's father, had been the most vocal critic of the Zarthians during the crisis. His emotional outburst, "You detained human children? Are you insane?" had become famous throughout human space. Now, to everyone's surprise, he had accepted a position on the Cultural Exchange Committee. "I've come to understand they truly didn't know better," he explained when asked about his change of heart. And Samantha wouldn't stop talking about how fascinating their technology is. Sometimes we need to see things through our children's eyes. For Billy, Samantha, and Kevin, life had changed in unexpected ways. They had become minor celebrities and frequent guests at diplomatic functions. More importantly, they had formed genuine friendships with several young Zarthian scientists. Billy Collins received a special package one day, a formal letter from the Zarthian Science Academy thanking him for the educational diagrams, his crayon drawings, he had created while in detention. They were now proudly displayed in the Academy's Xenobiology department as valuable insights into human cognitive development. "Mom, my drawings are in an alien museum," he exclaimed, dancing around the kitchen. "They say they're important scientific artifacts." Kevin Patel had taught several Zarthians to play soccer, leading to the formation of the first Zarthian soccer team, with special rules to account for their 6 limbs. But perhaps the most touching moment came 6 months after the incident, at an official ceremony celebrating the newly established Human-Zarthian Friendship Treaty. Samantha Wright approached, Supreme Leader Zazer with a small gift in her hands. "I made this for you," she said, holding out a colorful friendship bracelet she had woven herself. On Earth, friends exchanged these as a symbol of connection. The tall alien leader knelt down on his 4 lower limbs to bring himself closer to her level. With surprising gentleness, one of his 4 hands accepted the simple bracelet. "I am honored, young Samantha Wright," he said, his voice translator carrying genuine emotion. "From misunderstanding comes wisdom, and from wisdom, friendship." As Captain Eric Mason watched this exchange, he thought about how far they had come. What had started as a diplomatic disaster had transformed into something remarkable, a genuine connection between 2 profoundly different species who had found a way to bridge the vast biological and cultural differences that separated them, and it had all started because 3 resourceful children had shown aliens that human kids were a lot smarter, braver, and more forgiving than anyone might have expected.